Coming up right now is The Space Show.
This is your community radio station, 88.3 Southern FM.
Welcome to The Space Show, presented by members of the Space Association of Australia. Hello, I'm Andrew Rennie. And we're going to start with space news, and then we're going to talk about aliens, extraterrestrial aliens, and could we cope? And, we have a thing on the budget as well. And we're also going to be hearing from Michael Davis, the chair of the Andy Thomas Foundation. And if time allows, we'll even go to Monash University and hear about their high-powered rocketry program. But first up, let's have Space Show news. Last night, Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers said, and I quote, "We're investing billions more in science and innovation through the Medical Research Fund and in the CSIRO and Square Kilometre Array," end quote. In a statement released by his office, he was more specific, and I quote, "Investing $1.5 billion to strengthen our research and innovation institutions, including CSIRO, the Australia Centre for Disease Preparedness, the National Measurement Institute, and the Square Kilometre Array." In a joint statement with Senator Tim Ayres, Chalmers wrote, $387.4 million for the CSIRO to support its internationally leading research. $273 million for the National Measurement Institute, which underpins vital trade and transportation and transactions and supports consumer confidence. And $21.7 million funding for the Australian Space Agency to continue delivering its core functions as part of fostering a local space sector that lifts the broader economy and improves the lives of Australians. Now, this funding is over 2 years, from 2026 to 2027, or starting then. Funding to continue building the Square Kilometre Array, the world's most ambitious radio astronomy project, to answer fundamental scientific questions and develop new technologies. The Bureau of Meteorology provides the Civil Aviation Safety Authority with meteorological, volcanic ash and space weather information necessary for safe and efficient civil aviation operations. The Bureau works with the Department of Industry, Science and Resources to help build Australia's Earth observation from space capabilities. CSIRO has stewardship of the Australia Telescope National Facility. During the 2025 to 2026 financial year, they had a target of achieving a minimum of 70% successful astronomical observations. At present, the radio telescope is actually achieving 74%. Geoscience Australia operates the Alice Springs ground station, which receives imagery from the Landsat satellites. At budget reporting time, it was on target to meet its aim of capturing more than 98% of possible data. One budget paper deals with women. The Space Agency made this contribution to the Women's Statement.
Gender Analysis in Practice, Future Direction of the Australian Space Agency. Catherine Benelpeg, the first professional astronaut to represent Australia, was named 2026 Australian of the Year, but there is still significant work to do to lift gender equality in the space sector. Australia's space and associated industries are highly gender segregated, with a predominantly male workforce. The lack of representation of women in the space industry is further compounded by a lack of intersectional diversity and significant underrepresentation of First Nations people. As the local space sector continues to grow, the Australian Space Agency is working to improve women's representation in the sector and across the skills pipeline, leading whole-of-government space policy and international space partnerships. The Australian Space Agency will progress gender equality through recruitment and procurement processes, capability uplift in critical technologies, the design of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, STEM, outreach activities through the Australian Space Discovery Centre, and the engagements of Ms. Benelpeg.
As is usual, the budget makes provision for Australia's liability for damages caused by space objects and high-powered rockets.
Under the United Nations Convention on International Liability for Damage Caused by Space Objects, the government may be liable to pay compensation for damage caused on the surface of the Earth or to aircraft in flight by space objects or high-powered rockets launched from Australia, or by Australian nationals overseas. For activities approved under the Space, Launches and Returns, Act 2018, the Act, the government also accepts liability for damage suffered by Australian nationals, to a maximum value of $3 billion above an insured level. To address this risk, in order to have a space object or high-power rocket activity authorised under the Act, the responsible party is required to insure against, or take financial responsibility for, damage to third parties. The amount of insurance or financial responsibility is capped at $100 million. The Act provides for amounts lower than $100 million depending on the risk profile of the activity. A maximum probable loss methodology is also available to calculate the amount of insurance or financial responsibility.
And the amount set aside is unchanged from previous years. That is $3 billion. The budget papers also refer to the Department of Defence and points out that it has many responsibilities. One of them is military space. In all, defence spending rises from $52 billion in the 2025-26 financial year to nearly $62 billion in the 2029-30 financial year. Now, how much of that is space-related is not specified in the budget papers. At least I couldn't find it this afternoon. Now, to another topic. The idea that extraterrestrial aliens are visiting Earth is an idea that just will not go away. We used to call them angels, then UFOs, and now UAPs. A few days ago, President Trump was asked about this by a reporter from Fox News as they flew aboard Air Force One.
We asked the president about it in February.
Barack Obama said that aliens are real. Have you seen any evidence of non-human visitors to Earth?
Well, he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that.
So aliens are real?
Well, I don't know if they're real or not. I can tell you he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. Well, he made a big mistake. He took it out of classified information. No, I don't have an opinion on it.
Now, as Trump welcomed the 4 Artemis II astronauts to the White House, one reporter pestered him about UAPs. Now, the sight of astronauts and NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman trying not to laugh and staring at the ceiling is a wonder to behold. Sorry, we don't have the pictures here, but here's the audio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 2 questions for you. First, on the topic of space, do you have an update on the UFO files and when we're going to be seeing those?
Well, I think we're going to be releasing as much as we can
in the near future. For some reason, and I guess it's just a reason that's been in the minds of people for a long time, and that is such, they want to find out about the UFOs and anything having to do with UFO or related material, and we're going to be releasing a lot of things from that we have, and I think some of it's going to be very interesting to people. I've interviewed people, my first term primarily, but I interviewed some pilots, very solid people, and they said they saw things that you wouldn't believe, so you're going to be reading about it.
You certainly will. Now, I mentioned that the idea is quite old, and there are people who say that, the government's keeping it secret because we couldn't cope. Well, way back in New Zealand in the 1970s, I recorded this off the national program. It's by Peter Reid, who presented the monthly television program The Night Sky from 1963 to 1974. Now, Peter Reid was the New Zealand equivalent of England's Patrick Moore. Not as famous, of course, but Peter Reid was quite famous in New Zealand. So this is going to be a discussion by Peter Reid and others with Professor Alan Forbes of Victoria University. The talk is titled Extraterrestrial Life. Could we cope? ?
If you read, we know there is no life on the moon, but looking out into deep space, what sort of area and dimension are we talking about? How far are we looking?
Well, into deep space, possibly we're looking about 500,000 light years, which is the whole breadth of the galaxy. In the solar system, we've found no life. Even on Mars, they haven't found any conclusive life there. So it looks very much as though the solar system is going to be empty except for ourselves, which is the only form of life here. This is rather unique as far as we're concerned because it raises all sorts of problems for us, like what are we going to do, what are we doing with it, and so on. But I think out there, as many people like Carl Sagan have said, you must accept life in some form or other because there's millions of stars. But then we have to regard the fact that the nearest star to us is 4.25 light years away. That's 26 billion miles.
That's outside our own galaxy.
Outside our own galaxy. So the signal of anything found there was going to take 4.25 years to get here, if we're traveling at the speed of light, which we're not. So let's say the signal is going to take about 100 years to get here. This makes a rather, it gives us a sort of an enormous time span in which to come to any conclusions about it.
Professor Forbes, how would a message from space that there was some form of life affect the psyche of mankind? We think we're the only ones at the moment.
I'm afraid I can't speak for the psyche of mankind. You're talking about a communication system, and this communication comes to a particular terminus on Earth, whether it's in Houston or wherever it might be. And the effect on the psyche of mankind depends on the translation of this communication from this receiving station via the various political filters and so forth, or military secrecy filters. The actual reaction would depend to a very large extent on just what information about this communication was made available towards mankind.
How about, for example, a photograph of some identifiable form, an animal form of some description?
If I may take the word animal in its literal sense, and again, I think people would react with some degree of curiosity. There might be some twinges of panic in a few breasts, but I think there'd be interest, there'd be curiosity. There'd be those people who say, I told you so, and there'd be those people who say it's a mirage. We all know that the Earth is still flat. You've got a wide variety of responses. If you found something that was humanoid, then again, I think depending on how this information was communicated to people in general, you would find people looking very carefully to see if it was sub-humanoid, like a monkey, a chimpanzee, something like that, in which case, again, one doesn't really worry. One could put such things in zoos. If one found a humanoid in a spacesuit on this planet, something recognizably a spaceman, or someone construed in that fashion, yes, I think people might start to get a little bit worried, because here is A, an unknown quantity. B, however, it has sufficiently known qualities to make it look a bit human, and most human beings know enough about other human beings to know that they are acquisitive and territorial and so forth, and there might be some anxiety.
Reverend Bob Scott, from the theological point of view, has the Church ever considered this possibility seriously, that we will one day communicate with another intelligence, perhaps greater than our own? Wouldn't this cut right through the very basis of Christianity, that man is the great creation?
I'm not aware of the Church or theologians or whatever doing any serious thinking about this. I don't think it would cause any panic or disturbance, because theologians, we've never claimed that human beings, or we were central or unique in the universe. I would cite the example, for instance, of understanding the presence of angels, which many parts of the Church would accept quite happily. These are free, intelligent beings who are in a relationship to God. Now, I don't necessarily believe there are angels, but many parts of the Church do. And that, as it were, provides the machinery of coping with the information that there would be other life forms around. I suspect we haven't done that sort of thinking, A, because there's not enough information, and secondly because, and this is my private opinion, that we feel we are probably superior to it anyway. I mean, there's no indication there's going to be life that's going to be in competition with us at all. I mean, it's life form, animal form, we think probably very small. And so it really hasn't been a question for discussion that I know of.
So, in other words, for the ordinary man of the street, if one day a message comes back to a radio telescope somewhere on Earth from a distant planet, that a definite form of intelligent life is trying to communicate with us, that this will have no impact at all on theology.
As Professor Forbes says, there would be curiosity, I think. There would be all sorts of interesting questions beginning to be raised about what relationship that life form had with its creator and so on. But I honestly don't think there'd be any feeling of threat or disturbance about that. I think partly because, as Peter Reed has already said, there'd probably be enough time for the educative process to go on. So I don't really think there's been any feeling of threat at all.
Do you think man is curious enough to want to know? Do you think it really?
He's only curious enough. He's only curious enough to want to know if he perceives this hypothesized form of life, its presence, its existence, as having any immediate consequence for his, as an individual's personal existence. Under those circumstances, again, how he responds will depend on, how he has responded to all unknown situations that he as an individual has faced in the past. But I would imagine that these are rather restricted circumstances. We're talking about something very remote in time and space.
If there was the discovery of a life form that seemed to be threatening, I would think we'd then move into the area of having to suppress that, possibly, until there was further information about it, or until we knew the size of the threat. I can see all sorts of political implications coming in at this point.
Yes, the point is that people panic principally when they don't know what they're up against.
Or have the feeling that what they're up against is stronger than they are.
Yes, that's true, and that feeling may be generated on a sound rational basis, or simply because it looks bigger, or something of that kind. Under these circumstances, of course, what you do is to issue information. If you're in some kind of controlling situation, any information that you purvey about this life form is of an optimistic kind.
If man saw this life form as a threat, do you think this would bind the human race together more fully?
Only for a short time. I think most of us here are old enough to remember the Second World War. There were dedicated patriots in Britain, for example, during the Second World War. There were also those people who quite specifically went out to capitalize in it, the black marketeers and so forth. Again, you cannot generalize. People will deal with it as they think as to their greatest personal profit.
Peter Reed, how deeply have space scientists thought about this question of actually finding life? I suppose they hope. Dr. William Pickering, when he was in New Zealand recently, talked of going out to Saturn and far beyond. Now, he, no doubt, one day would like to find some form of intelligent life to be able to give him the information which he can't get on Earth, give it back to him from space. In what way have space scientists thought about this question, and have they done anything about it?
Well, they want to find out how life begins. If they'd found any amoebic life on Mars, it would have given them an idea that life can set up in any form, any part of the universe. They haven't as yet found anything on Mars, and it's just the fact that if they can find life elsewhere, then we've got a knowledge, actually, that life does begin somewhere in the universe, that there's life spread throughout the universe, that life just needs to get the right warmth, attention, and a planet to live on, and it'll get going. But we haven't found that yet. Actually, the whole thing is that we haven't found one trace of life as we know it anywhere in the universe so far. Even in the solar system, they're looking with rockets and Vikings and so on. Out into the universe, they're looking with radio telescopes to discern whether there's molecules of life out there. And they've found numerous molecules, but not a molecule of life, no amino acids at all. So actually, it would infer that life just begins here on this Earth. But how it begins, we don't know. And that's the one thing that they're planning to look into. They haven't any knowledge of how it begins.
Actually, Peter, you brought a thought to my mind. If we did find recognizable intelligent life form, if the big if, I could imagine those Christians, for instance, who accept as a true record, for instance, the Adam and Eve story, being terribly confused and wondering whether there's an Adam and Eve type story for that planet or whatever. And I can imagine that really confusing the very fundamentalist theologian. But I don't think there are too many of them left anyway.
Oh, there's quite a few of them, believe me. Those that write the letters and so on. There's quite a number.
Peter Reed, some space scientists must believe that life in some form exists, otherwise they wouldn't be optimistic enough to put plaques on Pioneer 10, was it?
They do, yes. The Pioneer 10 actually was our first plaque that's gone out of the solar system, actually. That it went out... I think it's heading for somewhere in Taurus, which it hopes to reach in about 1 million AD. But this plaque has the man and the woman on it, the number of planets out from the sun, and the third planet shows this this Pioneer 10 leaving and so on. The distance of the nearest pulsars on it, and things like the hydrogen atom and things of that nature on the plaque, in the hope that somewhere, sometime, there may be an extragalactic ship that finds it and gives them some idea as to where it's come from.
Lots of resources are being put into, surely, radio transmissions to space. I mean, they can't be spending millions of dollars just wasting their money. They must expect to find something. Well, what do they expect to come back?
Well, so far the radio transmissions to space are all connected with heat, with the hydrogen gas heat and so on, the 31 centimeter line and etc. They haven't got anything that can pinpoint a target as yet, like an optical telescope can. But they're doing an enormous amount of work on quasars and all that kind of thing in the universe with these radio telescopes. But they haven't got anything, as I say, that can pinpoint a planet or any small source entirely.
Professor Forbes, do you think that man should be educated to expect another form of intelligent life to come into his realm one day?
I see no compelling reason for it. I think he has... You're obviously construing the possibility of life being found as a problem, or a problem situation with which man might have to cope in order to survive. I think that it's much more sensible, this is a political view, I'm afraid, rather than a professional one, but there are so many more problems close to home that any educational effort should be directed towards them.
We're not really too worried about the instruction thing, I presume, because there is that time thing that Peter's been talking about. It won't happen overnight, will it?
Well, I'm just wondering if this Mariner type of spacecraft sees some massing up of ships coming to Earth. Then, of course, we have a real problem on our hands, how we're going to meet this. But even so, we may have 100 years or so to chew it over ourselves before we take any action.
There's a lovely piece of irony here, which has just struck me about Pioneer 10 and its plaques. I think Pioneer 10, yes. We did say. Some life discovers a ship and manages, principally because it has at least as efficient intellectual processes as we have, to deduce that so many stars along the left and turn sharp right, you will find this planet with these shaped people and these shaped people, and you're talking about 1 million AD. The irony is, of course, that probably, if things go on as they are, this planet might well be empty of human life by then.
It could be, yes.
So what a sort of letdown for the people that you're exciting by our attempts to communicate with them.
Yes.
Quite a poser for them.
Indeed, indeed.
We've discovered something now we haven't.
Where they're lying to us.
Yes, that's right.
Well, in conclusion, would you say then that if photographs came back from a planet far out in space and were shown on the 6:30 television news, that the New Zealander in his room just wouldn't react?
Well, there's some that wouldn't. I know I would. It'd be... Actually, I think mankind needs something like this now to set him back on course again. But it would be a tremendous thing, even though we couldn't do anything about it for 100 years or more.
I wouldn't react badly. I would then begin to discuss with others some interesting questions about what the relationship of that being was with its creator, whether it had gone off course, if I can use that word, with its creator, and therefore needed any redeeming, to use the theological word, whether it was in fact more spiritual or closer to its creator than we were, and that would help us. You know, it would raise all sorts of interesting questions, but it wouldn't be an urgent discussion, I wouldn't think. It would be a lovely discussion for people over a period of time.
We've been listening to Extraterrestrial Life, Could We Cope? Taking part in the discussion were Professor Alan Forbes of Victoria University, Peter Reid and the Reverend Bob Lowe. The chairman was Martin Hadlow.
And that was recorded from the NZBC during the 1970s. This is The Space Show.
88.3 Southern FM.
The Space Show is presented by members of the Space Association of Australia. We hold free, as in no charge, public meetings. And here's a recording we made at one of our meetings. This is Michael Davis, the chair of the Andy Thomas Space Foundation from Adelaide, and Nicola Sassanelli, an adjunct professor and chief executive officer of the Andy Thomas Space Foundation. Here's how the conversation went.
Good evening, everyone. It's Michael Davis speaking from Adelaide. What I propose to do is to introduce my colleague and our Chief Executive Officer, Nicola Sassanelli. We've known each other and we've been very good friends for over 5 years. Nicola came to Australia as science attaché for the government of Italy, working in the Italian embassy in Canberra. And after achieving some wonderful things on behalf of the Italian government, he decided to change sides, and he moved to South Australia, to Adelaide, and was employed by the South Australian government, working on industry development and international relations. And after a few years, he became involved in the space sector in South Australia and has some marvellous achievements under his belt, including the establishment of the decision of the South Australian government to establish the South Australian Space Industry Centre, which was a decision made in the lead up to the International Astronautical Congress in Adelaide in 2017. And so it was the first state government to see the importance of developing the Australian space industry at state level. And the South Australian government, I believe, has sort of shown the way to the other state governments in Australia, and in some senses also to the Commonwealth government. After the announcement of the establishment of the Australian Space Agency at the IAC in September 2017, Nicola embarked upon a new project, which was a bid to establish the SmartSat Cooperative Research Centre. And with the assistance of many players throughout Australia, that bid was ultimately successful. And then he was seconded to work part-time for the Cooperative Research Centre. But not being satisfied with those achievements, he also initiated the idea of a foundation to support space education and outreach in Australia. And we're now very fortunate that he is also seconded by the South Australian government part-time to be our Chief Executive Officer. So I think that's probably all I need to say about Nicola.
Thank you, Michael. And what you say is not just related to me, but in all of this journey, you were with me. So, and we start to work together in 2015 when you and your team were able to bring the International Astronaut Conference 2017 here in Adelaide. So that was the moment where the South Australian government started to think about to have an office dedicated to the space. And then, of course, have here the Space Agency in Australia, as well the Smart CRC, and Duces in Fundo, the Andy Thomas Foundation is part of our work. We spend a lot of time together, coffee, and Saturday and Sunday to write a report and write proposal. But anyway, we are here, and thanks to invite us to present the Andy Thomas Foundation. This idea has come a couple years ago. The foundation has been established in July last year, 2020, and but of course we started 1 year before than this, and there was, in the space environment, we start to think about how it's important to keep high the number of students that decide to choose STEM's subjects. So, and that is, everybody's know how the technology-led economy, knowledge economy needs skilled people. Big data, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, is just some example that is related to space, but is create a demand of student with a technological skill. STEM skills job are growing at, for what the statistic reported, 1.5 times faster than any other job. So this is why it is so important to consider space as a sort of a vehicle or tools to promote STEM in the school. And that is easy to think because space, everybody, when we talk about space, we talk about inspiration. So space has unusual power to inspire young kids, but also adult or people like us. Of course, in the last period of time, Elon Musk and SpaceX, Brandon Nelson, so all of these people, they start to entry in our day-by-day life and think about them as a sort of hero. And we start to think about we need to do something. So, as Michael said before, in 2018, the Australian Space Agency was established, and we were at the back of this. In 2019, the Smart CRC was established, and then we start to think about with Michael. Okay, we have a national organization that take care about the regulation and the developed Australian commercial space industry. Then we have the Smart CRC that take care about R&D, so research and development in this country. So we need an organization, national organization, that have to take care about outreach and education. Education in the space sector, but education in general. So our background, we started, as you said before, we established as a charitable cooperation in 2020, governed by a board of directors, funded by grants, donation, fundraising events, and of course the deductible gift register status approved in Parliament in June 2021. We are inspired by two important people that we consider very close to our foundation, and we give them, the rule of patron. Patron means people that can take care of us. They are for us as a sort of mentor. We talk and share idea and also networking. And of course, Dr. Andy Thomas and Dr. Megan Clark. So what we have in mind, why we established this, because of course we have a big vision. A vision is to support, to help the building of this space ecosystem in Australia and to drive the progress in education, research and innovation. That is our big vision. That is in some way is embedded in the South Australian space ecosystem system. Mission is to promote social well-being and overcome disadvantage in Australia, and advocate in favor of space as a domain, as international cooperation for peaceful ecosystems. But at the same time, it is also to support the space education and outreach, and of course to inspire young people to pursue the career not only in space but also, in particular, to choose a STEM subject. So the purpose, and then is come with the implementation as three important purpose. One is advanced space education, then is raising space awareness, and then contribute to the national space community. These three elements are very, very important, then become for us a sort of pillar, that is considered for us strategic. And that is why from the day one, when we established this foundation, we already have the strategy and we start already to orient our effort in these three directions. One is advanced space education. What does it mean? It means support education in all the spectrum of the age, from the primary school to postgraduate, post-PhD student. And then we can do this with some education fund, as well as support the Australian Discovery Centre. That is an important pillar for us. And we will see that we already implemented more than 200,000 Australian dollar the first year in the first 6 program. The second pillar is raising space awareness and outreach. What does mean this? Is stay with the community, bringing space to the community, talk with them. And that is not just the young generation. Michael and myself, we have a frequent presentation to the Rotary, Lions, and also to the Discovery Center. We bring kids. When we has established this education fund, it's not just a program for the school, but we would like to be involved with the school. We would like to involve the teacher. We would like to involve the parent. So not only a new generation. The third important element is contributing to the national space community and innovation. What does mean this? Means not do what Marsa CRC is doing, so promote R&D through project. But what we are doing, and we do this also before the establishment of this foundation, is create event. So we have the Australian Space Forum. Every 6 months we have this forum. And of course, we would like to stay close to our Discovery Center as well as the education. So try to create a sort of networking events where all the ecosystem is in some way involved. We already talked about this education fund. I just want to give you an example. We are already allocated the first year 215,000 Australian dollar, and that we have 6 + 1 that will be announced in the couple days. So 7 programs. The first program is a program with our company that is sponsor the Andy Thomas Foundation, that is the EOS space system in Canberra. So they do mainly optical communication. So we establish an award with 3 prizes that is dedicated to Australian researchers or doctor candidate for the best research project proposal in these specific fields. There are many fields is already reported in the program, in the call. So what we would like to do is researchers that has some idea or some application towards this area, so we can give them $10,000 if the idea is allow the US to think about this potential new project. The second program is we support the Southern Hemisphere Space Study Program. As you know, this is an important undergraduate and postgraduate program that is done by the ESU, the International Space University, and the University of South Australia. We support 1 scholarship at the moment, full scholarship for a candidate, an Australian candidate. As the program 1, this is for everybody in Australia. It's not just limited to South Australia. The third program is 3 scholarship for students that intended to attend an honors or master program in the space-related field. It's very important because we are involved also in the Smart CRC, and Smart CRC are able to provide 74 PhD full scholarship around the 7 years of life. But often we are not able to find some post-bachelor quite mature to be involved in some PhD program. So what we try to do is offer some honors or master just to, fix this gap, about bachelor and PhD student. The program 4 is more oriented to internship. So we are involved with the Spirit, University of Melbourne, and the Spirit is one of the projects was funded by the Australian Space Agency. Is a CubeSat 6U led by Melbourne University with many companies like CETA, Innovor, and Human Space. So what we will do is 5 awards, $6,000 each to support this internship to students that intend to spend some time in this industry. The program number 5 is we give a prize, 9 prize of $5,000 each to 9 schools in South Australia. This program is full supported by South Australian government. So what we would like to do is, in particular, working with the student and teacher in year 7 and 8 and 9, and raise the importance of space in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, the 17 goals that we found a strong interest as the space-based technology can help to solve this goal. The next one is again 6 schools in South Australia, because this program is completely support the South Australian government, and that is a sort of professional development for 25 teachers in 9 different South Australian primary schools. So also in this case, not only teacher, but for example, we ask not only student but also teachers. So we ask the teacher to come to the Discovery Center, stay with us with the company that is quite mature in the last 2-3 years in established courses like this is Maker Empires, and work with these learning by design courses. It's quite important because we found in the last year that is not just stimulate the student but also stimulate the teacher that are interested to be involved in this activity. So at the end of this story, the story is we would like to find partners, so partners that can share with us common value, the power of education, pursuing excellence, and diversity inclusion. that is a three important value that we would like to share with our partners. So what does mean this? For example, we are looking for company, not only company involved in the space sector, but company that enjoy or in their value is there is to stimulate more people, more students, more young students to choose the STEM subject. Also government, if state government would like to implement some program in for school, primary or high school, more than happy to do the same thing that we did with our pilot project in South Australia to do this. Actually, we are working with New South Wales government. We're already involved in cost per kind kit in Sydney. That is all for me.
That was Nicola Sassinelli, Adjunct Professor and Chief Executive Officer of the Andy Thomas Foundation, and he was speaking in South Melbourne at a meeting of the Space Association of Australia.
You're listening to 88.3 Southern FM, the sounds of the Bayside.
A joint European and Chinese magnetospheric satellite called SMILE is due to be launched on May the 18th. SMILE is an acronym for Solar Wind Magnetosphere Ionospheric Link Explorer.
Every day, Earth faces a relentless attack from the Sun. A usually steady rain of tiny but fierce particles, known as the solar wind, can sometimes be interrupted by much bigger blasts, just like this one. Luckily, we have a defense: Earth's magnetic field. This shield that Earth holds up against the solar wind is all that prevents our thriving planet from turning into a barren wasteland. And finally, we've reached a moment in history where our scientific tools and technologies are advanced enough to get to the bottom of how exactly this magnetic shield works. Our latest investigator? SMILE. SMILE is equipped with a unique toolkit to give us our first complete look at the interaction between the solar wind and Earth. It will be the first ever mission to look at the edge of Earth's magnetic field with X-ray vision to uncover where and how our shield is hit. At the same time, it will use ultraviolet vision to record the northern lights for more than 40 hours at a time, helping us understand how exactly Earth responds to solar storms. SMILE will send the data it collects back down to Earth, mainly to a ground station in O'Higgins, Antarctica. Scientists will dig deep into this data to find out more. They will tackle big questions, like what happens where the solar wind meets Earth's magnetic shield? What causes magnetic glitches on the dark side of Earth? And how can we predict the most dangerous threats in advance?